You've most likely experienced this effect where you roll back the volume on your guitar and the tone gets muddy and you're losing all the high end. It could be the pedal, could be your amplifier, but the most likely culprit is actually the wiring harness in your instrument. Now there's quite a lot of different wiring harnesses out there. Some of them have treble bleed with different capacitors, and it gets kind of complicated if you really start to delve into it, knowing which one you should be using. So to simplify matters, I'm using the ObsidianWire harness for Les Paul. This one here has a 50s and 60s toggle switch on the inside, meaning that if I want to, I can set both pickup to either 50s or 60s, or mix it up, meaning, for example, I could have the 50s mode on the bridge, but have the 60s mode on the neck pickup. But what does that even mean? What are these modes? How are they impacting your tone? So when the volume is fully open, you're not going to hear a difference at all. It's when you start to roll back the volume that you're going to start to make that difference. So right now I have this guitar set into 50s mode. What I've done at the back is open the cavity so I can switch them, which are right here on the harness. I can just manually switch between them. Now I'm only keeping it this way just for this video. Otherwise I would just set it and forget it, put the backplate on and not have to touch this again. But because this is a demo of both modes, I'm going to keep it this way for the entire video and just show you the differences between both. We're going to start with the clean tone first. And the reason for that is that it's going to give you a really good example, especially if you're wondering what the interaction between both pickups together, mixing the 50s and 60s modes. So I'm going to show you what it's like when one of them has one mode and the other one the other mode, and you start to roll back the volume. It's going to be pretty thorough. So what I encourage you to do is use the timestamps in the description below so you can just jump to whatever part of this video that you need. So a great philosophy is show, don't tell. I'm going to start with the neck and then the bridge, and we're going to get to hear what that sounds like. So this is 50s mode on the neck. Now, if you're wondering what the benefits are of using the 50s wiring harness versus the 60s, the 50s in this kit is going to play a little better with certain fuzzes, and it's going to play super well with buffered pedals. So if you're using Boss pedals or any of the pedals that have a great buffer in it, this just really works well. Because what happens is that with the buffer, as you roll off your guitar volume, you're keeping the high end, versus if you use a non-buffered pedal, it's going to darken this way, which is great with something like a germanium fuzz, something like a fuzz face or a tone bender, but it does have its shortcomings. Those are the effects of using the 50s wiring in this guitar, rolling that high end. If you want it to stay clear, then you're probably going to want the other mode, which I'm going to show you in just a second. So I switched everything to 60s mode. We're starting with the neck. Over to the bridge. Now I'm going to toggle between the two modes, and you're going to hear that difference, one in the brightness, but two also in the output volume. Here we are in 60s mode. Using both pickups. If you're wondering what the benefits would be by choosing either the 50s or 60s, I'm going to demonstrate that now with pedals. All of these circuitries, as complex as they are, will interact in very different ways with, one, the pickups in your guitars, and then the wiring scheme. So if you have a treble bleed, if you have the 50s wiring, if you have the 60s wiring, and I'm sure there are other types of wiring out there that I'm not aware of, all of these will interact differently with your pedals. And the reason why you want to know this is sometimes you've just acquired a new amp or a new pedal, and you go to roll off that volume and you go, okay, this pedal sounds great, but it doesn't clean up very well. It might not be the pedal. It might actually be the wiring harness in your guitar. So we're going to try 5 pedals. I have 2 different fuzzes. Both of them use germanium, but both of them clean up very differently using the 50s and the 60s wiring in this harness. I have a Paddy whacker from Dr. Scientist and Leprechaun Effects. It's a more niche and boutique type of pedal. I have the Hudson Broadcast. I have the Boss DS-1 Distortion. I also have one of my favorite pedals, which is the Red Llama. And we have the Wampler Belle, which is going to be more of a light overdrive. So we're going to test both modes and determine if one is better than the other, or if it's an advantage for us as players to be able to switch between both or use 2 different modes depending on the pickups that we use with whatever pedals we have on our pedal board. So let's get to the test. We're going to start with light overdrive using the Wampler Belle. So I have both pickups set to 50s mode. I'm going to play a riff and then I'm going to go to the back and switch to 60s, and that way we can hear how this pedal reacts to both different modes. So as you can hear, there's a really big volume drop, and it also darkens the tone. Now that might not be a bad thing, especially in a band setting where you need to pull back a bit. So instead of going to your pedal and having to have something before it to boost and then to take it down a notch, you can just use your volume boost and actually control 2 parameters at the same time, which is your volume and also the clarity of your tone. So that way you can let the singer or whatever part's coming in cut through the mix without you kind of stepping over their sound. And now we're going to flip over to the neck pickup. I'm going to start with the 50s setting and then move on to the 60s. I'm going to stop at around 5 on the dial, and then when I'm going to put it into the 60s mode, you'll notice that clarity come back, but also the volume doesn't diminish compared to when it's full on. It's not a drastic taper that you're hearing in terms of volume. So maybe that could be a cool thing in certain application, but perhaps it could be a nuisance in the setting where you need to actually back off the volume and let other instruments shine through. So let's test that out. I'm going to put it in the 50s mode. So right now I'm on 5. I'm going to flip it back to the 50s mode. So now I'm going to be less drastic with the volume cut. I'm going to go from 10 to about 8. That's going to yield more clarity maybe in terms of the volume, but it still gets a bit muffled, but it's not a drastic jump from 10 to 5 in that 50s mode. So again, from 10 to 8, and then I'm going to flip it to the 60s mode, and I'm going to do the same test. Now the last part of this test is to put the neck and the bridge pickup at 8 on the dial. I'm going to start with the 50s mode, then the 60s, and then I'm going to blend 1 to the 50s and 1 to the 60s, and let's just pay attention to what that sounds like. So starting with the 50s. So we're starting in the 50s mode using the Red Llama. This one here is a light to medium overdrive pedal with a lot of characteristics that makes it sound more like a broken up tweed amp or maybe even a fuzz. So we're going to start with the bridge, then the neck, roll back to around 5, and then we're going to compare that with the 60s. In this example, we're using the very first pedal with a buffer. This one here is going to interact differently with the 50s and 60s wiring. Whether that's good or bad really depends on the results that you need. Pay attention to the volume and the high-end roll-off in the 50s versus that of the 60s, and you'll see which one would be your favorite in both cases. None of them are right or wrong. It just depends on the results that you're looking for. So starting with the bridge and then the neck in 50s, and as soon as I get to 5, I'm going to switch on the 60s. Roll the volume back up, put it back to 50s, and roll it back down for both examples. Let's do the same test now with the neck. We'll see if it has a difference in terms of the impact on the tone, or if it's pretty consistent whether you use the neck or bridge pickup. other interesting effect of using something like the 50s or 60s mode in this harness is how it interacts with fuzz. I know it might not be the most popular effect in the world, but fuzz aficionados will tell you that the wiring in your guitar does have an impact. So in this case, different fuzzes, despite having the same types of components, will react differently to the 50s or 60s or even a treble bleed. So in this case, I'm going to use two very different fuzzes. One of them is the Hudson Broadcast, which is fairly popular and most people know of this pedal. And the other one is a little known pedal that is a collaboration between Dr. Scientist and Leprechaun Effects right here in Edmonton, Canada. And it is kind of fuzz face-ish, but it goes into big muff territory as well. And it reacts quite drastically different when you roll off the volume compared to the Hudson. So let's listen to both. We're going to start with the Paddy Whacker first, obviously testing both modes, bridge and neck, and then we're going to try the Hudson Broadcast. Now we're trying the same thing with the neck in the 50s mode. And now we're going to perform the exact same kind of test with the Hudson Broadcast, obviously a different circuit, and might or may not react differently. 50s mode to start with, and then I'm going to kick in the 60s. If you stuck around until the end of the video, thank you so much. I'm going to be giving you my opinion on this particular kit and who I think it's for. If you're the kind of guitar player that really likes using a lot of different pedals, but don't necessarily enjoy the interaction your guitar's having with the cleanup of these pedals, this might be the solution, in the sense that you could maybe take the bridge pickup and put it in the 60s mode. That way, when you roll off the volume, you don't get a sudden drop in volume and you don't lose a whole lot of high end. Now that depends on your pedals, but if you play a lot of lead parts, you need it to clean up, but you don't want to get lost in the mix, that's a great way to do it. Also, if you like how the humbucker interacts with a fuzz, but you don't want it to stay super clean and super loud and very like top end crispy, you might prefer the 50s mode in this wiring harness, because what it does is that it reduces the volume and it reduces some of the high end and it lets the pedal do the work. That's just one example. Of course, there's going to be mix and match of different pickup settings and different situations that you might want to use it in. But for myself, 60s in the bridge and 50s in the neck is going to be most likely what's going to get me to put the back plate on here, set it and forget it. That would be how I would use it. Now I'm interested in finding out how you would use a kit like this, and I'm also going to be putting the exact same kit in this guitar. Now the folks at ObsidianWire told me that the kit isn't really made for the SG, so there might be a need for certain modification. That's at my own risk. They don't recommend doing that, but I'm stubborn and I want to try it, because right now this guitar is equipped with 300K Gibson pots and they sound really dark, and when you roll off the volume it gets even darker, which is not really pleasant. Works well with certain pedals, but for like 80% of my pedals and amplifiers it sounds really dark and muddy. So what I want to do now is use the same kit in this one. If it works, I'm going to make a video. If it doesn't work, obviously you're not going to see the video, but you can always ask me if it didn't work and you're not seeing a video. You can ask me in the comment section here why it didn't work and I'll let you know. I also have a P-bass kit from ObsidianWire and a jazz bass kit from them, which I'm going to be putting in 2 of my basses, and I'm going to be doing a video on both of those very soon. So if you're interested in seeing those, you can click on the video appearing on screen right now, click on one of them, and I'm going to see you in the next one. Cheers.